How's everyone doing? So, Strength Chat episode 44, and today I have got a very special guest for you. Today I am joined by the president and co-founder of the Strength Guys, Jason Tremblay. How are you doing, sir?
I appreciate you having me on, Stephen. I'm well, and I'm happy to be here and have a strength chat with you. So,
spot on. How's things going? What have you been up to? Have things settled down since the Nationals?
With my life, things have not settled down since U.S. Nationals.
Okay.
I'm also a student full-time. I'm finishing up my bachelor's in physical education at Mount Royal University in Calgary, Alberta. And I've also got my own goals and things going on with my own training. So always a precarious balancing act, if you will.
Yeah.
But right after U.S. Nationals, Arnold Classic registration opened up last night for the Pro American.
Okay.
We have a few clients competing there. A few clients competing, actually a lot of clients, like probably up to 15, competing at the Canadian Nationals.
Oh, wow.
The European Championship is 4 weeks away, and so it's the holiday season and final exams and all that. So things haven't settled down, but all is really well with me. So.
Okay. Oh, good. So it's not just powerlifters and athletes that you're training in sort of Canada and America. Then how many lifters do you have over in Europe?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
So just having athletes in Canada and America, you mentioned European Championships. How many athletes do you have over in Europe?
Oh, I don't have an exact number for that because I mean they're pretty well dispersed throughout the company. But me personally, 2 European 83 kilo clients. One is Jure Rus of Slovenia.
Okay.
He's a previous European champion, top 5 finisher in the world in the 83 kilo division at IPF Worlds. And the other, I'm kind of in an assistant overseeing role, if you will. Alfred is his main coach, is Owen Hubbard of Great Britain.
Mm-hmm.
Who Owen's got a name for himself, obviously great bench presser. And
yeah, absolutely.
The one thing I'll say about Owen, he's been an absolute delight to work with, as has Jure. Owen's work ethic is off the charts, and I absolutely love that. It actually fires me up to see how much he loves the sport and how hard he will train and work in order to get to where he wants to go.
Yeah, I know from a coach's point of view, I'm a powerlifting coach myself, mainly for beginners and intermediates. When they come in and they've got that burning desire to keep wanting to get better and keep pushing, that's half the job done as a coach, really.
Yeah.
So before we get into sort of the meat of the podcast, then, do you want to just give a little bit of background to yourself, how you got involved in coaching, your background in powerlifting, and how did the Strength Guys come about?
Sure. So the Strength Guys is, I guess, I just turned 26 in September. I started the Strength Guys with Anthony Walker shortly after my 19th birthday. By the time I was 20, I was coaching a young Canadian natural bodybuilder named Jeff Nippert, who I'm sure everyone has heard of now, as he's become quite the YouTube sensation and public figure in our industry. But at the time, Jeff and I were training to just help him gain some strength. And he said that was really important to him on a personal level. So after about 6 to 8 months of training and a qualifying meet, we showed up at the first Canadian Powerlifting Nationals. I had never been to a powerlifting meet before. My background was solely in natural bodybuilding.
Okay.
And Jeff placed second at the time to Coach O'Gannon, who was a great deadlifter in the 74 kilo division. He was deadlifting the world record at the time. I believe that was unofficially. I don't know if he ever actually got it in international competition, but it was moving at nationals nonetheless. And then a few months later, one of Jeff's close friends in the company, Travis Schmitz, was at a gym in rural Minnesota, and he saw this guy benching 365 for reps. And I went over. He's like, "Hey, I'm Travis. Like, you'd be really good at powerlifting. Like, you ever thought about trying it?" And the guy ended up being Taylor Atwood, and Taylor responds, "No, what's powerlifting?" Like, he didn't know. So Travis, like, here's the number to my coach. I think he does some powerlifting coaching, and they just kept in touch. Taylor signed up for USA Nationals, and signed up with me a few months after that. Taylor and I showed up at USA Nationals. We both had no idea what it meant to be an open national champion of the USA. It was the third powerlifting meet I had ever been to in my life. I had still never even competed in a powerlifting meet at this time. And Taylor won. So not only did he win, but he was very close to, he was 1 kilo away from the total that would have won the IPF Worlds, the first ever Raw IPF Worlds that took place a week before. So I guess from that point on, I kind of transitioned into powerlifting coaching more and more because I had to. Taylor had trusted me. Jeff had trusted me. And a few other lifters at the time had trusted me. And I had to figure this out, not only for them to repay that trust, but also for me. So it didn't feel like I was sort of scamming them, so to speak. And then a bunch of other lifters signed on over time. And I think through a lot of hard work and a lot of caring about them and investing in educational experiences, I've been able to achieve some success with them in powerlifting so far.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Yeah, I think that's because sometimes you can fall into the trap of oh yeah, I can go to a powerlifting meet and I'll know what I'm doing. But how was your? Obviously, you've gained a lot more experience now. Do you still get nervous when you're handling people on a meet day? How has it changed from the very first one to how you are now?
I absolutely I get nervous because the most addicting thing about being a powerlifting coach for me is that you can, like, I mean, our training, I think scientifically, like, very well designed training is training really, really hard and being able to not get injured. I think in very plain English, that's a very well developed program. We are pushing these people sometimes for, this is their goal of the entire year of training, is to win worlds. And on your third squat, if that thing doesn't go up, you're out of the meet. Yeah. Goal's gone, right? So you are literally, this is going to happen or it's not. Third attempt, it's on the bar. Your entire year of sacrifice and work and my investments in that, let's see it, you know? Yeah. And so I think if you don't get nervous or if you don't get anything out of that, I don't know if the sport is for you, you know, or coaching is for you. Because that's like, in what scenarios can you get like that do or die, like just third attempt? It's so exciting. It's addicting. I love it.
Yeah, I've taken a couple of people to a competition, and yeah, I was more nervous, excited, anxious than probably they were. As a competing myself, sometimes it's a little bit, that's the easy bit. But you know, having handled people as well, yeah, it is nervous, and you know, trying to pick the right weights for the final squat, bench, and deadlift. But yeah, that's what keeps you wanting to go back and keep competing again. Yeah. So you mentioned there about obviously it was on your third meet when you'd gone to a national competition. After that, who did you look to increase your knowledge base and make you a little bit better? Who were your go-to or influences?
Yeah, I would say the original kind of vision statement I had for the Strength Guys, very informal, was that I wanted to train our clients online, as well as athletes who are Olympians would be trained. So to equip them with as many advantages which they could get in training, in the monitoring of training, in nutrition, in recovery, that they would accept into their life. Because every time you kind of accept one of those advantages, it comes at the expense of time or money or social relationships and stuff like that. So basically, if someone wants it, we can give them it all, and that was my motivation for the Strength Guys in the start. And so now I think, sorry, I just lost my train of thought there for a second. I think what it has become is almost for us to, we're analyzing blood work. We have the highest end version of Dartfish for biomechanical analysis. We've created our own software. I feel like there's not an area that we haven't fully invested ourselves into figuring out.
Okay.
And so what we're providing our athletes with now is, I think, every advantage under the sun. And it's like, what will you accept? And so I'd say that's how we've evolved from the start to where we are. And within that, I think I've learned so much from strength and conditioning, first and foremost. I went to intern under Brett Bartholomew, who I consider to be one of, if not the very best strength and conditioning coach in the world. And I learned from him, in particular to powerlifting. I learned so many things in strength and conditioning, but I learned from him athlete monitoring, collection of data for like sports science stuff, basic practical stuff, and then how like movement preparation. This is a very big one. And also another very big one is communication tactics. I think one of Brett's great gifts is how he can relate to athletes. And I would say the same for Dan Noble, who I interned with the next summer at the Hill Academy in Toronto. It's very much similar. In powerlifting, I think Matt Gary and Susie Hartwick-Gary have been two of my biggest mentors. They're incredibly supportive people of the Strength Guys and of me. Their expertise in game day handling, I think if we are ever, and this happens sometimes, coaching a lifter that is going up against a lifter who is coached by the Garys, and they're of relatively equal levels of strength, Ben and I are like, it's going to be a tough day, right? Because with the Garys that this lifter is very likely going at least 8 out of 9. With their final lift, if they do miss it, it's going to be like a deadlift to beat you. That like 9 out of 10 times the exact right weight is getting put on the bar. And that if like that person's going to be ready. And I think a lot of people don't know, but like the 4th powerlifting meet I attended was the Arnold Classic with Taylor, and he bombed. And I think there were reasons on his end why that happened, and there were certainly reasons on my end why that happened. There's a lot of lessons to be learned, and the Garys were the ones who kind of shone the light on what meet day coaching was to me. I would say informally, Matt Jordan of the Canadian Sport Institute. He's the director of performance, if I'm not correct. And he was kind enough to show me how they monitor the Olympic athletes here in Canada. So that was a very big inspiration for how we now monitor our powerlifters. And then I'd say above all, it's been Ben Esgrove, who I work with. We coach athletes together. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a more successful coach in all of raw powerlifting than Ben Escrow has been. Because raw powerlifting and the IPF is a relatively new thing when you think about how few world championships there have been.
Yeah.
And I think Ben's clients have dominated that scene, to be honest. And when I had the opportunity to pair up with Ben Escrow, I knew what he had done. A lot of people don't know because he's a very kept to himself with these things.
Yeah.
But I didn't even bat an eye. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Because I think Ben has figured some things out in raw powerlifting that a lot of others haven't yet. And just go full bore into it. And let's see how far we can take it. So that's where we are now.
Oh, nice. It's interesting that you mentioned there about how you've developed the strength guys comes from, when you mentioned there about Brett Bartholomew, and about how you monitor your athletes, and obviously learning how to speak to them on a one-to-one basis, getting to know the athletes, because I think sometimes, the program side of things can sometimes take care of itself. People can get stronger, but how do you monitor their sleep? How do you monitor their recovery? How do you know how to get the best out of them? I know Brett Bartholomew's conscious coaching. It's a good read, I think, as a coach. And on meet day, you've got to know your athlete inside and out, and know how they're going. And I think when you're watching, like Matt Gary, when you're watching him handle somebody, it's an art. It's an art form to try and figure it out and know, right, what is going to be the right weight to put on the bar. Which, yeah, I do find that really, really interesting, and something that you've got to build up to. Moving on to the next part of it, obviously you mentioned there about being if you're up against Matt Gary, and that that they were going to maybe go 8 for 9. Obviously, the Shifting the Curve program, there was some stats that came out that he had great success with the Ohio State University powerlifting team. I think the stats were, correct me if I'm wrong, there was 10 out of the 14 went 8 for 9. Everyone got PBs. Out of the 126 attempts, they got 110 were made. Why has that program been so successful? What's the background behind that program?
Yeah, I think, like, if you're a member of my strength book, I mean, you can download and do the Shifting the Curve program yourself, and you could also look at the data of it. And the distinguishing feature of Shifting the Curve is, I think amongst coaches, it's pretty unanimous that if you know what you're doing, you know that intensity has to linearly increase throughout a block, whether you undulate it on a weekly basis or whatever, but it still has to go up the trend line in order to peak strength. Because obviously you're not going to display maximum strength training at 75% intensity, right? You need to work your way up. Yeah. And in order to do that, you can't continue doing high amounts of volume with, when you're training singles at 92.5 or 95% of your 1 rep maximum, right? Because you can only do X many reps with that, and each effort is pretty dang hard. The delineating feature, which I feel makes our training more successful than others, is our data analysis. We make specific changes as we begin to increase the intensity of the training to ensure that the athlete does not taper or have the adaptations gained from the accumulation phase dissipate closer to the competition. So I feel it's a very common thing where the training of an athlete will be going very well farther out from a meet. Yeah. And as you get closer, you start to run into problems and then on meet day it's an underperformance. And I feel that by challenging the paradigm of the basic linear periodization, volume has to go like this, intensity has to go like this, we're saying no, volume has to go like this. You know, we're pushing really hard. And I know Ben loves that term, but I think that's honestly, like, it's so freaking important. And it absolutely blows my mind, even at the very like top level of powerlifting coaching right now, that there are so few tracking data. And I'm like, it's crazy, because you're leaving it all up to chance. Like, you're saying that I can compute these numbers and I know what's going on in my head, and it's not like that. Because, like, to use an example for Owen, and Owen's still a little bit far out, but he went from doing 7 reps last week for like 4 sets to doing 6 reps this week. Well, if we take a rep out from all those sets, that's a lot of volume that we're losing, right? And if we make that change across the board on day 2 and day 3 as well, that's thousands of pounds of workload, which we decreased by just taking out 1 rep. And if we don't make any other changes to the structure of the program from doing that, we stand the chance of losing that training adaptation or having it fade back to a baseline by the time the competition comes around. So shifting the curve, I think, on a very high-end like analysis of the training data, the weekly volumes and intensities, that's what separates it. And then beyond that, it's a pre-made program which individualizes itself based off of your level and your preferences and all that. So I think that helps it along as well to perform well for beginners, intermediates, and advanced athletes.
So when you mentioned there about, that was going to be my next question really, how did you, in terms of the, obviously you mentioned there about the success with the Ohio State University, how do you work about individualizing that program? Because, you know, I am a big believer in that, not necessarily one size fits all with powerlifters and, you know, athletes and training programs. So how do you go about individualizing that program and for different lifters?
Yeah. So I had this conversation with a lifter from Croatia yesterday who wanted to do shifting the curve to prepare for Croatian nationals. And then if he makes it through a Croatian nationals, he wanted to sign on for coaching with me. And I told him that, well, unless a client starts with training data for me to look at, the best we can do, and I feel like this is not common practice in the industry even, is to set you up on a program which is likely to progressively overload you, right? But there's a lot of assumptions that you have to make. And so shifting the curve on my strength book, shifting the curve is our training philosophy as a whole, right? Like, it's what we do. But on my strength book, the program version of it contains a filter. And the filter says, in the past 4 months, how many times per week have you trained specifically? And what I mean by that is not a pause squat, not a pause deadlift, like I mean the competition lift, the back squat, the competition bench press, and the competition deadlift. And you have the choice of 2 times, 3 times, or 4 times. And if you're training at only 1 time, you just go to the 2 times one. And then it says, well, have you made progress? Yes or no? And this is our decision tree when we coach as well. And if you have made progress, we keep you at that frequency because it's working, right? And I believe that our training from a motor learning standpoint, due to the consistency of the variables that we're putting out, will enhance skill development faster than other programs. So just stay there, continue training. It's likely that the DEP scheme will also overload you a bit anyways. If you haven't, go to the 3X, or if you haven't made progress 3 times per week, go to the 4. I'll say as well that, like, we have had less than 5 athletes in the last 2 years training a lift 4 times per week, at least on my end. Like, Taylor just graduated to that on bench press. Like, for a long time there, he's making progress on 3 times per week for bench press. So 4 times per week is pretty advanced. And we've had many lifters achieve over 450 Wilks on the 3X program. So it scales well. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think looking at that, I read I'm on my strength book, and that's how I came across shifting the curve. And what you mentioned there about if you are taking a lifter on, sometimes people don't record the data, so it is quite hard to where is your starting point. And I think not necessarily just as a program, but as a system of how to actually work with athletes, with powerlifters, it gives you a lot more. Again, made a really good point there. It cuts out the guessing a little bit, and makes you sure that you're closer to getting it right than being at the other end of the spectrum and not really working on it. Do you find that, obviously you mentioned there about Taylor swapping between 3 times to 4 times, do you find that there's people flick between 1 and 2, or do you find that usually one method works well the majority of the time?
So amongst our clients, this is not like necessarily research stuff, but it's stuff that we see happens. Don't really have a great explanation for why, but sometimes there are periods where a lifter like Rob Ali is an example. He was 5th at US Nationals in the 83. He can adapt to training very efficiently, where for his meet in the summer, Pennsylvania State Championships, he only trained squat 2 per week. And a lifter at his level, squatting 280 kilos or more, that's surprising, right? Like, it's not something which we see normally in our model. And it's so, I guess it would be similar for Sean Moser and Sean's deadlift. We trained Sean's deadlift with extremely low levels of volume, and it went through the roof, right? So not all progress follows the model which we had to give for shifting the curve. But I'd say generally I strongly stand behind that model. And I think that if you don't have a model, it's just a program, a lot of things are missing because you're missing a lot of people and a lot of their needs. So I don't think there will ever be a perfect model. If there is, I think artificial intelligence developed very, 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 very well will be the one to find it. I don't think a human mind will be able to comprehend it.
Yeah. I think there's too many outliers. There's too many factors. It is an all-encompassing sort of thing to make sure that you get it right for that athlete. When someone is first following the system, obviously for people listening who may be beginners or looking to get involved, and use the shifting the curve on my strength book, how long would you suggest, or how long have you left it as a coach if they're a little bit unsure about following? I know it's pretty straightforward, but say they think, oh well, I think it's been working. How long would you leave it before they maybe not see results with it to change the program? How does that work?
Yeah, so shifting the curve now is a full system. In its totality, at least to run through it once completely, it's 24 weeks in length. So you'd start with STC2 to build up its general physical preparation work. So some conditioning, mobility, core stability, strengthening muscles which are not commonly trained, or contractile phases which aren't emphasized strongly in different planes of movement and powerlifting, mainly for injury prevention and variation and what have you. And then we progress, well, at the end of that stage, you do an AMRAP. at 85% of the 1 rep max on each lift. And based off of our criteria, which is in the program, if you want to see it, if you do more than X amount of repetitions, you will increase the 1 rep by X. And that's the APRE method of auto-regulating training. And then you will go on your way and you will complete the next 8 weeks of programming in STC2. It's higher rep stuff because you're further out from the meet. STC2 is off season. At the end of that, you will do another AMRAP at 85%. A, because it gives you the ability to compare based off what you did at the end of phase 1. And B, because it recalibrates your 1 rep max before you go into the competition prep, which is STC1. So if you do more than X repetitions, again, we increase the 1 RM. If you do the same or less, maybe the recommendation we would advise is to go up in frequency from what you did in STC2. So let's say you were doing the 2 times per week in STC2 and it didn't, no change. Do STC3 during your meet prep. And based off our experience, we're pretty confident that you're going to see what you're looking for. And it's the same with if you did the 3X in STC2 and no change. All right, we'll do the 4X. Like, we're pretty certain that you're going to get what you're looking for. So, and we say that based off experience.
Interesting. So, chatting there about the different types of workouts in the workouts. Obviously, you mentioned there the STC1 and STC2. Depending on people, if people are training 3 times or 5 times, mentioning there about the difference in the volume and the movement prep and the mobility. How do those workouts actually change? I know from my point of view, I usually program 3 to 4 workouts. Obviously, the maximum you do is 5, and minimum is 3. How do the workouts and what you include vary and differ?
Yeah, I think during a meet prep, powerlifting is one of the few sports where in training you could actually practice the competition. When you think about any other sport, I guess football on your end, or soccer here in North America as an example, you could play practice matches in training, but it's not the same as a match, right? Not to say there's no benefit to the training, but you can't replicate a match in training to its exact, there's an audience, everyone's going at each other, like highly, highly, highly competitive. It's tough to do without risking injury from your squad. Well, in powerlifting, you could replicate the competition. You could do more than the competition in training, right? So during competition prep, we take that opportunity fully. Competition prep is STC1, squat, bench press, and deadlift. From a motor learning standpoint, there's no better exercise, I argue, to get better at the competition lifts than the competition lifts themselves, taught well, right? Learn the technique and practice them over and over and over again. That would be point A, and why I think the SBD workouts are effective. Point B is your stamina. By the time you get to the meet, you are so used to doing SBD that by deadlift, you don't have to really worry about your energy levels bonking, right? You are conditioned for the sport. I think that's a great asset. And number 3, I like to study a lot when I'm not working or hanging out around the house cooking or whatever. And I had the Sheiko and Omar Isif video on when Sheiko did his interview with them. And Sheiko said he didn't like the SBD workout because he felt that I'm paraphrasing for him, right? And I don't remember his exact words. My interpretation was that he thinks it's disadvantageous for the deadlift training and it's also compounding the stresses put on the lower body, right? Because you're doing two things in one day.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of adaptation which takes place, and it's tough when you start doing SBD. Once you've adapted to it, it's your turn, right? Like it is now your baseline to do that kind of stuff. So we like to have very specific competition preps. And then the only other things which we'll do are usually back work, some shoulder work, whatever. Bodybuilding on a 4th or 5th day. During the off season, I agree strongly that there needs to be a lot of general physical preparation in the program, psychologically, and also I think for reducing the risk of injury, and possibly even for sensitizing the body to go into another competition prep to where it will kind of soak up the specificity and respond better, right? So STC2 is a lot more bodybuilding work. In phase 1 of STC2, which is the post-competition phase, a lot of strength and conditioning work. So looking at strengthening the adductors, strengthening the hamstrings eccentrically, mobility, stuff like this, stuff which is not in normal powerlifting training for us in the meet prep. We kind of take a lot of time, 4 weeks to be exact, after the meet to focus on that. So we feel that STC as a whole, 2 and 1, encompasses the full spectrum of what we'd want to provide from a models level, so not from an individual basis of GPP and specific preparation and modifications based off of your level, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think picking out a few key points from there, I think that's good. Like, you know, I mentioned before, it is a good system to have in place. I think sometimes people can usually miss some things out, and one of the main things you said there is conditioning. And I think sometimes people can go into a meet. Obviously, you do all 3 lifts in a competition, and you know there's sometimes quite a relatively quick turnaround for that competition. So you need to be able to cope with that on a meet day. And I think some powerlifters will not focus on some of their weak points and add in different movement patterns, which I do think sometimes is overlooked. And you look at some powerlifters that are injured, it takes them such a long time to get back because they never do any other movements. And I think going back to the first point you made about speaking, the mentors that you had from other coaches, people are still human. They still have to, you know, be robust and not be injured for life, which I think is I think a good trait to have. So talking about the different types of workouts, how would they be structured then? How, in terms of when would the competition lifts be throughout the program, and when would you add in the accessory day or accessory exercises to help with those lifts?
Yeah. So in the competition prep, the squat, bench, press, deadlift every day, we use the SSPT, which short for Supreme Sports Performance Training by Matt and Susie Gary. We use their deadlift singles approach to training in SSPT. So because you're only doing singles and you're resting like 45 to 60 seconds in between reps until the weight gets heavier, of course, says 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 minutes. We train them like if you're doing 3X, you're doing SBD on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then you get to choose. I can only train 3 sessions per week. So that's all you will do. There would be no accessory work, so you didn't choose that option. You could choose to have 4 sessions per week where you would have like 1 back and shoulder day, or you could do 5 sessions per week where you would have 2. And you could slot those in accordingly, like whenever it best fits your schedule. The only thing that we ask is that you have a day, ideally, in between SBD workouts. From there on, we follow the structure of daily undulating periodization, as researched by Mike Sordos and Chad Dolan and Ben Esgro. First day of the week is usually higher reps, and the lowest intensity of the week. The second day of the week, again, if we're using a 3X model, is kind of the middle reps and middle intensity of the week. And the last day of the week is the lowest reps and the highest intensity of the week. So each week, if you look at it, follows the volume intensity, right? That's the way the weeks go. So if you look at our training on a daily basis, what you see is these undulations over time, which increase. Daily undulating periodization in the literature has been shown to be most effective. This is why we use it. If there's another form of training which convincingly proves itself to be more effective, we will begin to use that. We're not like one-trick ponies. We use RPE, AMRAP. We will use velocity training. Like, we will use what gets the job done. And I think that I would wish, or I would hope, that more coaches would have that mentality for the sake of their athletes as well.
Yeah, I think, when you said there about the research type of things, I think sometimes it's easy to fall in, well, this worked for Joe Blogs down the road, let's use that. I think when you mentioned there about, the research side of it, I don't know whether you follow it as well, the mass research that comes out every month. That, as strength coaches and in being interested in strength training, that keeps you up to date with exactly what you need to know. And I think because new research is coming out, and like you said there, until something new comes out, this is what we're going to be using. And if it's getting results, that's the main thing with it. When you chatted, just going back to a little bit when you started the conversation about tracking everything. So obviously now we know which workout, which shift in the curve workout or program will be right for you. How do you go about monitoring everything? What is it do you actually monitor, and how do you use all of that information? Why I ask is, from my point of view, I used to internship for Bradford Bulls and Yorkshire Carnegie, which are two rugby teams. And at the end of the day, the coach would say, okay, so what are the numbers? How fit are they? How strong are they? But he only wanted certain things. So do you use everything, or do you pick and choose what feedback you might give back to the athlete?
Yeah, we're pretty selective and determined in what we're going to look for. And I'd say my long-term goal of monitoring training is to kind of to get in there and just like to be their friend. Like a friend gets told some things, friend and coach. To be able to wear the different hats. Friends get told things that sometimes coaches don't. So my long-term goal of monitoring training, and this is unconventional, is to get to the level where we can crack jokes on a daily basis. With Rob Ali, I'll use the example of he's very big into the Marvel comic universe. So Rob and I will crack jokes about that. I'm a Canadian. Sean Moser is an American. We talk about hockey almost every night, or golf. Taylor is an ex-football player, so we'll crack jokes about football and tag each other in Sports Center highlights and all that. That's the friend hat.
Yeah.
The coach hat, which I think is I wear it always for everyone, but especially for the newer people, what I'm looking at, if we have a more formal relationship before all those kind of walls have come down, and I think it's more of also a deeper interpersonal relationship as well, is to have an athlete log. And the athletes send it to me on a weekly basis, where we just look at sleep, hydration, soreness, stress levels, and energy levels. And we conditionally format it. So if there's an issue, it will highlight as red if it's a very important issue, or a yellow light if it's like a cautionary issue. And so if we are not getting the adaptation that we want from training, and there seems to be an issue in the athlete log, we have a conversation about it. We monitor that, and we try to see improvement in the preparedness habits of the athlete. If there is nothing wrong with the athlete log, and the athlete is healthy, then we shift our attention back to what's being done in the actual training, right? Like, are we doing our job? Which in case, and it so depends, right? Like, we can go so far down the rabbit hole, but one of the things that we'll make sure we're doing first is that we are actually progressively overloading the athlete. If they are not being overloaded based off of what they've done in the past, and they are not making progress, in spite of them working hard, lifting with good technique, preparing for training well, I think it's a pretty obvious answer about why they may not be progressing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's kind of our analysis process in a nutshell.
Okay. So you also mentioned there about the mechanics side of things. Obviously, the big at the start of the conversation, big part of thing is recovery, stress, sleep. How does obviously being online coaches, how much does the biomechanics side of things work? Because as lifters, we'll record our lifts and change it. How much influence does that play on the coaching side of things?
Yeah, one of the things which I'm most grateful for Brett Bartholomew's role in my life for was he helped me to realize that I was very creative and good with building things in this realm, particularly in Microsoft Excel. And so everything is ran out of Excel. Now we've basically created our own coaching Excel software, which is unique to anyone else. It's unique because it was built by our own inspiration and for our own needs. So basically, we have our unique software, which is built specifically for a coaching process. So it's all ran out of that. And it's been 8 years now. So it's been refined and refined and refined and rebuilt over and over and over again to get to this point. And actually, we're going to rebuild it again here soon, right? So we continuously, as coaches, all of us in our group are extremely hungry to continue to get better, to continue to do better for our clients. And I think that these constant innovations and refinements are showing through actions that we want to give our clients the best, and we want them to be the best. So, yeah, these are the things that we do on a regular basis.
I think that was a nice little summing up there of wanting you as coaches to provide clients with the best, like I say, pushing them on to be the best. Having read the article on Shifting the Curve, looked at the programming, look at the results that you've had with that, looking at the Ohio State University success of the lifters that you've had at the nationals, I find it really interesting. And as a coach myself, instead of just being this is a program, having a system in place and trying to make sure that all the bases are covered, and just making sure that, like you say, giving them everything and making sure that you're close to getting it right, rather than on the other end of the spectrum just going in blind. So obviously, like we said before, the great year at the nationals, success with quite a lot of lifters. I think you had 2 national champions this year.
Yeah, Taylor Atwood in the men's 74 and Eli Burks in the men's 105.
So a great year at nationals. What's next for the strength guys? Obviously, you said there about wanting to progress as coaches, get your athletes to be the best. What can we expect to see from the strength guys and your athletes heading into next year and beyond?
I will just disclose my goals for the company openly.
Yeah.
I want to see every single one of my coaches get what they want out of it. I want to see those who have the desire to coach world level bodybuilders do so. Those who have the desire to coach world level powerlifters, I want them to be regulars on the scene. I feel like that requires a culture of mentoring, and all of us need to be very hungry to achieve that. I feel like we're on our path to doing that. Secondly, I really want to grow locally here in Canada. My journey kind of instantaneously, as soon as Taylor signed on, took me abroad. And then when I met Clinton Lee, who was actually second to Taylor at Worlds, but Clinton was one of my longtime athletes before then as well. It took me abroad into Asia, and I think the successes of them and John Downing and Alfred and all these lifters I've coached have led us into Europe, and it's kind of like being a team, like a community here in Canada. It's the one thing that's kind of eluded us, but now it's starting to happen, largely in part to the community of the now closed gym, but of Accelerate Fitness, which is here in Calgary. Almost everyone from Worlds trained here, so it's pretty cool to see this gym that I was a part of, where you walk in and like, here's Bryce Lewis, Taylor, Clinton, Ure, Owen, Jen Thompson and her kids, like all lifting weights at your gym. It's like, this is it's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
So second would be to build the community in Canada. And third would be, I want each and every one of my clients personally to get what they want out of training, and kind of from a philosophical standpoint, define what they are looking for out of it. So as I said, I was kind of on a basis of we could send memes to each other with a lot of my clients. I want to get to that point with all of them, It's great to have those relationships. It's one of the joys of my life. I hope that my passion for doing this comes off openly. And I want everyone to have the benefit of that. So that's kind of my personal working goal. Because the reality is that, and I think this is a blessing of coaching a world champion at a young age, is that I can say now honestly that, like, from an accomplishment standpoint, I've gotten that out of the way. I've gotten it out of my system. And now it's the motivation and love I have for my clients that, and the love I have for my work that makes me want to continue and get better. So it's something that's intrinsic instead of accolades driven. And I think a lot of people may be missing that. So it's different now. I want to see others really kill it. And I want to continue to challenge my own limits and see how far I could take or lead people to.
I think that, sounds like there's some exciting times ahead, and it's great to hear that, somebody who has had such great success having a world champion, that you're still doing it because you like doing it, that you love doing it. It's still exciting. It's still want you to push forward. So everything what we've chatted about today, if people are looking to start a new program, or if they're already following the program but aren't really seeing results, what would be your sort of take-home points or words of wisdom from our chat today?
Yeah. First off, if you're not seeing results, you need to have training data. Otherwise, we don't really have a basis to have this conversation, right? Like, you have no idea what you're doing. I have no idea what you're doing. So you're basically clueless and you're not getting results, which is awful. So get a $8 membership to My Strength Book, the most basic one, or AppLift, or whatever the heck you want to use. Create your own Excel spreadsheet and start figuring out what you're actually doing. And then we could have a conversation about why it's not working. That leads me to the point of, if you have data and it's not working, and there's no issues with your preparedness or your attitude towards training or your consistency, what have you, instill some progressive overload into your program. There's a reason why in ancient Greece, this was like, they realized this worked. And then it's funny, we've kind of overcomplicated training over time to the point where it's sometimes just forgotten that, like, oh yeah, progressive overload works. So that would be the second point. And I guess the third point, we haven't really talked about it, but it's so important, is be consistent. It's extremely unlikely that if you were to train for years and years on end, that you wouldn't get better in some way, even if you were on a suboptimal plan. So those would be my points.
3 very, very good points. And you know, the one thing at the end, being consistent and patient with your strength. You know, you build strength over time. It's not just a case of, oh, I'll be stronger in 2 weeks' time. It's, you know, you can always keep getting better. I've really enjoyed that chat. I think it's opened, as someone who coaches powerlifting themselves, it's opened, made me think about a lot more things, and how I can improve as a coach. I hope everyone listening enjoyed that as well. And for anyone listening who might want to get involved in coaching or follow the work that you yourself and other coaches at the Strength Guys do, where can they find you or get in contact with you?
I don't post much on social media. I like to be in my own world and live my life in the reality of it, not to try and finally curate it on my feed. So I don't advise following me. Follow the company. The company is at the Strength Guys, and I know my staff as well. There's a lot, so I'll rattle off the names. Alfred Jong, Ben Esgro, and Brandon Roberts, Chad Dolan, who's currently with the military, John Downing, Kedrick Kwan, Nicola, Ryan and Erica Smith, John Shua, and Taylor Atwood. Give them follows. They post stuff far more often than I do. You can follow us on Facebook at Strength Guys, Twitter at Strength Guys. Basically everything is Strength Guys, so that's where you'll find us.
Absolutely spot on. Thank you very much for taking the time to chat with me. Like I said before, it's made me think about a lot more how I can develop as a coach. The success that you've had speaks for itself. It speaks for itself. I wish you all the success in the future, and I hope, you know, you keep on developing and more champions and more success with your lifters and your coaches. Thank you very much to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.
Thanks. Happy training to everyone out there, and all